The chamber of the Galactic Council glowed with sterile brilliance, light bending across walls of crystal as if the stars themselves had been trapped inside. Voices hissed in layered tones, translated across thousands of tongues, each one sharp with certainty. At the center, High Consul Varric stood, posture rigid, eyes gleaming like obsidian knives. His voice cut through the murmurs. Earth has no more warriors. Their spirit is gone. Their weapons rust in forgotten graves. What remains of them clings to meaningless distractions, reality dramas, false idols, something called microwave burritos. Their threat is finished. The chamber erupted in laughter, a chorus of mockery. A scaled delegate raised a spine crest. Their greatest conflict now is deciding which streaming service has dominance. Another added with contempt. If they resist, they do so with sarcasm. Harmless, ineffective. But one voice did not laugh. The archivist, keeper of ancient records, shifted within his corner. His dozen eyes blinked slow and mournful. You misunderstand. Humanity's fire does not die so easily. There was one they could not break. One who was sealed, not slain. His voice fell lower, carrying like a whisper through stone. When he walks again, the galaxy will tremble. For a moment the chamber quieted. Then Varric barked a dry laugh. An Earth legend, a ghost story for frightened children. He raised his hand. We have conquered. Their warriors are gone. The words echoed, sharp as a closing gate. Far below the galaxy's glittering core, Earth lay dim, its cities patched together with rusted steel and stubborn pride. Humanity lived, but it did not flourish. Streets carried more silence than song, and memory of resistance had turned into an old scar too tender to touch. In a ruined coastal town, Mira Hale scoured a junkyard, her boots sinking into sand mixed with broken glass. The girl carried herself with the posture of someone who had learned early not to expect kindness. She stripped copper wire with callous hands, muttering at each stubborn knot. Behind her, neighbors watched and whispered. They always did. That one, an old man, spat. Her father resisted the council and died for it. Fools breed fools. Mira heard. She always heard. But she never answered. Words wasted on the blind. In the quiet of her workshop, she returned to her ritual, replaying the same fragment of hollow footage. Her father stood on a makeshift platform, voice raw with defiance. We are not done. Not until every ember is cold. His execution had followed within the hour. Mira pressed her palm against the flickering image, jaw tight. The ember had not gone cold. She swore it. The storm broke one afternoon when she uncovered a chamber buried beneath fallen concrete. The steel door resisted her wrench until her hands bled. At last, the seals hissed and stale air escaped like a sigh. She lowered her light inside and froze. There was a man, not young, not old. His body bore scars that spoke of wars no history book bothered to tell. His armor lay cracked, plated with strange alloys, symbols carved into metal like forgotten prayers. Across the cryopod, etched in letters half-faded, Elias Kale. Her breath faltered. The name was one she had only heard in hushed tones, buried beneath fear. The council had purged records, but fragments of stories had survived in whispers. Kale was the fighter they could not kill, so they sealed him instead. The pod hissed. Frost melted across glass. His eyes opened, not gentle, fierce. His breath tore into the silence like a beast freed from a cage. He sat up, every movement deliberate, dangerous. Mira stumbled back, stammering, You're supposed to be dead. His voice was gravel, ground down by centuries. No, worse, waiting. He stood, testing muscles stiff from ages of stillness. His gaze traveled across the ruined chamber, the cracked concrete, the silence of a world that had forgotten him. He laughed once, bitter and short. So, they won. For now. Mira forced herself to speak, to explain. The council ruled Earth. Humanity had no armies, only fragments, hiding in the cracks. People survived, but they did not fight. They could not. Kale listened. His eyes gave nothing. Then he looked at her, and something dangerous lit within them. They thought sealing me would end it. They forgot one thing. Mira swallowed. What's that? His reply came like a strike of steel. Humans don't stay sealed. In the following days, he walked the town. Children stared at him with wide eyes, sensing the weight of something older than memory. Adults muttered with suspicion, some spitting near his boots. One voice jeered, another relic, another corpse pretending to breathe. Then the raiders came. They dropped from the sky in armored skiffs, mercenaries in service to the council. They demanded tribute, food, tools, flesh if necessary. The townsfolk obeyed as they always did, heads bowed. But Kale stepped forward. No weapon, no armor, only a length of rusted pipe in his hand. The raiders laughed. One leaned close, voice dripping cruelty. You think you can stop us? We outnumber you. Kale swung. The pipe shattered bone. His movements were fast, brutal, without hesitation. Each strike carried precision born of endless wars. He tore weapons in their claws, broke spines against cracked walls, bound one soldier's hands with wire, and duct tape ripped from Myra's belt. Duct tape? He muttered with grim amusement before driving the soldier into the dust. Still fixes everything. The last raider fell choking on blood. Silence rolled across the town like a tide. People stared, unable to comprehend. A man alone, standing against their nightmares, and winning. Kale dropped the pipe, eyes scanning the shaking crowd. You can outnumber me, he said, breath ragged, but you'll never outnumber us. The words hung in the air like thunder. For the first time in decades, the embers stirred. Mira felt it, the town felt it, and across the galaxy, far away in a chamber of light, the archivist lifted his head. The sealed one had walked again. And if you're listening now, you must remember, there will always be those who declare your fight finished, who point at your scars and call them proof of defeat. But embers sleep, they do not die, and when one ember breathes, it can set the world aflame. Kale's arrival did not unite the town. It fractured it. Some whispered of salvation, others of ruin. The raiders' corpses still lay in the dirt, and their blood was proof enough that the council would soon notice. For the first time in years, the people feared something greater than hunger. They feared retaliation. Mira worked in her dimly lit workshop, sparks leaping as she welded a fragment of plating onto Kale's battered armor. He sat nearby, silent, his eyes fixed on the shadows outside, as if expecting enemies at every heartbeat. You shouldn't have fought them, she muttered, voice tight. Now they'll come for all of us. They were already coming, Kale said without looking at her. They always come. The difference now is whether you meet them on your knees or on your feet. His words stung. Mira slammed her tool down. Easy for you. You're a legend. You're not just anything, Kale interrupted, finally turning. His gaze pinned her where she stood. I've seen soldiers collapse under pressure you carry every day. You keep people alive. That makes you stronger than you know. She wanted to believe him, but belief was heavy, and she was tired of lifting weights that always broke her back. The following morning, the sky split open. A council warship descended, sleek metal glinting like the edge of a blade. Its shadow fell across the town, cold and absolute. A voice boomed from the speakers, translated into Earth's tongue with mechanical indifference. Turn over the sealed human. Resist, and this settlement burns. Panic erupted. Neighbors turned on Mira, on Kale. Some screamed to hand him over. Others wept, convinced their fate had already been sealed. Mira stood in the middle of it all, heart pounding. Kale stepped forward, calm as if the ship were nothing but a storm cloud. No one's handed me over, he said. The warship landed with a scream of engines. Troopers poured out, armor gleaming, weapons raised. The town scattered, doors slamming, windows shuttered. Mira felt her legs trembling. She wanted to run. Instead, she grabbed Kale's arm. This is suicide, she hissed. Maybe, he said, eyes hard as iron. But if someone doesn't stand here, you'll spend the rest of your life bowing. He pulled free and walked into the open street. The battle began in fire. Blaster bolts carved into stone walls. Kale moved like thunder unleashed, tearing rifles from hands, breaking armor with fists, using nothing but instinct, strength, and sheer ferocity. The council soldiers expected fear, but Kale met them with fury. Mira watched from the shadows, hands shaking. Then her gaze fell on a husk of machinery, an abandoned mech half buried in rubble. Its systems were dead, wires spilling like veins, but the frame still stood. Her father's voice echoed in memory. Not until every ember is cold. She scrambled inside the cockpit, fingers flying over dead controls. She rerouted power through scrap batteries, bypassed safety circuits, and coaxed the machine into a stuttering whine. The mech lurched forward, limbs clumsy but alive. Mira gritted her teeth and directed it into the fight. Kale barked over the chaos. "You'll get yourself killed!" She shouted back, "Better than hiding." The mech's fist smashed through a squad of soldiers. Kale laughed, wild and sharp, even as blood streaked down his jaw. For a fleeting moment, the town saw something it had forgotten. Humans fighting not as prey but as predators. But the council had not underestimated them entirely. More troops surged from the warship. They pinned Kale against the ground, boots grinding into his armor, weapons aimed at his skull. Mira screamed, driving the mech forward, but a dozen rifles swiveled toward her. She froze, heart hammering. Then it happened. One of the soldiers hesitated. His hands shook as he stared down at Kale. Slowly, almost unwillingly, he reached up and removed his helmet. A human face stared out. Young, confused. Kale blinked, stunned. "You're human?" The soldier's voice trembled. "They told us we were orphans, that Earth was ash." His eyes darted to the others. "I didn't know there were still people." The battlefield stilled. More helmets lifted. More human faces appeared, pale under alien light. They had been taken as children, raised to serve, never told of their origin. And now, confronted with Kale's defiance, they hesitated. Kale's voice broke through the silence, low but carrying. "They stole you, trained you to break your own, but you're not theirs. You never were." The first soldier dropped his weapon. Then another. Confusion rippled like a crack in glass. Alien officers shouted furious, but their commands faltered. Loyalty wavered. The tide shifted. Kale surged up with renewed strength, tearing through the remaining enemy lines with the deserters at his side. Myra's mech stumbled but struck, fist-shattering weapons. Together, they drove the invaders back toward the warship. Engines roared as the vessel lifted, retreating in smoke and fury. The town lay scarred but alive. Kale stood bloodied, armor hanging in shards, breath ragged. Mira climbed from the mech, limping, face streaked with grease and tears. Around them, the deserter soldiers, human children turned into weapons, looked lost, as if their entire existence had been shattered in a single hour. One boy whispered, "What are we supposed to do now?" Kale placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. "You remember. You choose. You fight for yourselves, not for them." The boy's lips trembled, but he nodded. For the first time, he looked less like a soldier and more like a human. The people of the town stepped cautiously from their homes. Some glared with resentment, others with awe. Whispers spread. Fear clashed with hope, and no one knew which would win. Kale turned to them all, voice raw, torn from the marrow of his being. "You don't need me. Not really. You've always had this inside you. They told you Earth was finished, that you had no warriors left. But I see fire in every one of you. You're not broken. You're only waiting to remember." The word struck like a drumbeat in the silence. For the first time in decades, people did not look down at their feet. They raised their eyes. And across the galaxy, in the crystalline chamber of the council, the archivist whispered to himself, "The sealed one walks again. The ember burns. If you are hearing this, know that despair is a lie whispered by those who fear your strength. They will tell you that you are alone, that you are finished, that you are nothing but dust waiting for the wind. But you are more than dust. You are ember waiting for breath. And when breath comes, you are fire." Smoke still hung over the town, curling into a sky bruised by the departing warship's engines. The battlefield smelled of scorched metal and blood. Survivors whispered as they stepped from hiding, their faces a blend of awe and fear. Kale stood at the center, his armor cracked, his body streaked with wounds that would have felled any other. Mira supported him. though her own legs trembled from exhaustion. The deserters, young soldiers bred by the council from stolen human children, lingered at the edge of the street, torn between shame and uncertainty. They had dropped their weapons, but they carried centuries of indoctrination in their bones. The oldest among them, barely past 20, spoke first. "If we stay, the council will kill us. If we leave, we don't even know who we are." Kale's voice was rough, but steady. "Then you start here. You stop letting them write your story." His gaze swept the group, fierce but not unkind. "You are not theirs. You never were, and you will not be again." The boy lowered his head, tears cutting clean lines through grime on his cheeks. He did not answer, but he did not leave either. That was enough for now. Mira faced her townsfolk, expecting condemnation. Instead, she saw division. Some still glared with hatred, convinced she had doomed them, but others looked at her differently, as if the very act of standing beside Kale had rekindled something long smothered. Hope was fragile, but it was visible, and that was more dangerous to the council than any weapon. Night came. Fires burned in makeshift pits, casting fractured light across ruined walls. Mira sat by one, tending to Kale's wounds with rough bandages and hands that shook no matter how she steadied them. "You nearly died today," she muttered. Kale smirked despite the blood at his lips. "Nearly is the story of my life." She shook her head. "You can't keep carrying this alone. You're one man." His eyes softened. "I'm not alone. Not anymore." He glanced at her, and the words carried weight that made her chest tighten. There was no declaration, no dramatic vow, only the quiet acknowledgement of connection born from fire and loss. The next morning, the deserters remained. They helped repair shattered homes, stumbling through tasks they had never learned but attempting nonetheless. A girl with hollow eyes asked Mira how to mend wiring, and Mira found herself teaching, surprised by the warmth that bloomed where suspicion had been. But Kale knew peace was temporary. The council would not accept defeat quietly. Retaliation would come, swift and merciless. He gathered Mira and the deserters around a cracked stone table and laid out a crude map of the coast. "We cannot wait for them to strike again," he said. "We move first. We show the galaxy Earth is not finished." The deserters hesitated, still shackled by doubt. Mira broke the silence. "If we do nothing, we stay slaves. If we fight, at least we choose the terms." Her voice surprised even herself, firm, unyielding. She saw her father in her reflection. Preparation consumed the following days. Kale trained the deserters, reshaping fear into discipline. Mira repaired weapons, welding with sparks that burned her arms but never slowed her hands. The town, once resigned to survival, began to hum with restless energy. Children whispered of battle. Elders spoke of ancestors who had once stood against impossible odds. The ember was no longer a secret. It glowed. When the council's forces returned, they came not with single warship, but with a fleet of black-winged vessels, descending like carrion crows. Their intent was clear: eradication. Kale stood at the forefront, Mira at his side, the deserters behind them, and the townsfolk clutching makeshift weapons with trembling determination. The sky lit with fire as the council deployed its army. The ground quaked with the weight of metal and malice. Kale raised his voice, carrying over the roar. "They thought we were done. They thought Earth was broken. But look at you, standing, breathing, fighting. We do not kneel. We do not break. We survive." The cry tore through the crowd like a spark through dry wood. A roar answered him, not polished, not trained, but human, raw and alive. The battle erupted. Alien troops surged forward, disciplined and armed with superior firepower. But the humans met them with ferocity born of desperation and memory. Mira piloted her half-broken mech again, fists crashing into armored lines. The deserters fought at her side, striking their former masters with a rage of stolen years. The townsfolk turned scrap into weapons, duct tape into shields, sarcasm into defiance. One shouted mid-fight, "Florida Man was training us all along," and swung a crowbar with manic glee. Kale was everywhere, a storm in human form. His body screamed with pain, but he moved as though pain were nothing but another enemy to be struck down. He tore through lines, shattered command posts, and with each victory he shouted words meant to be remembered. You are not finished, not today, not ever. Hours blurred into chaos. The ground became mud of blood and ash. Yet the council's line faltered. For every human who fell, another rose, and the deserters fought harder than any soldier born of loyalty. At last, the flagship lifted in retreat, engines wailing in defeat. The council had underestimated them twice, and the galaxy would not let them forget it. When silence finally returned, the survivors stood among ruins and corpses, but their heads were high. They had not been erased. They had burned their refusal into the night. Kale collapsed to his knees, exhaustion pulling at every scar. Mira knelt beside him, pressing her forehead against his, tears cutting through dirt on her cheeks. It's not over, she whispered. No, Kale agreed, his voice barely more than a rasp. It's beginning. The deserters gathered around, no longer soldiers, no longer orphans of lies. They were simply human. And for the first time they felt the weight of what that meant. The townsfolk looked at one another differently, no longer bound by silence, but by a shared defiance that pulsed like blood. Word would spread, across continents, across stars. Whispers would turn into songs, songs into battles, battles into memory. Humanity was not finished. Humanity had remembered. And you, who listen now, hear this truth carved from fire and loss. The world will tell you that you are too small, that your voice is ash, that your hands cannot shape destiny. They will call you broken, forgotten, sealed away. But embers are patient. They wait, they endure, and when the time comes, when courage breathes upon them, they blaze. Be the ember, burn,